very happy to introduce one of the leaders in the children's interactive space, Björn Jeffery.
Thank you, and thanks for having me back. How many were here last year and saw me speak up? So a few, but not as many as I thought. So I've actually made some new material for the few of you that actually saw me last year. So for your benefit, this is something different. So if I forget what to say or something, then I can also blame that. So what I thought I'd do is I would go through sort of looking back on 5 decisions that I made together with my team, and 3 quite nice ones and 2 not so good decisions. I spoke at a conference it must have been 2 years ago or something like that, and I was there to talk about my worst failure as an entrepreneur. And to every person I mentioned this to, they brought up another example than the one I intended and said, "Oh, you mean that one?" Like, "No, not that one." "Oh, it has to be that one." "No, not that one either, the third one." There's something in going through, I mean, everybody makes great choices, and when you sort of reverse engineer everything, most things sound quite good. I thought I'd tell you some of that, which is not entirely reverse engineered, and trying to be as honest as I can about it, but also some big mistakes that we made, and things which were troublesome at the time, and just simply things that could be avoided if I'd known better at the time. So thus the split between the good decisions and the bad decisions. I thought I would do a very short, for those of you that are not familiar with this is exceptionally short, but still, a brief introduction to Toca Boca and what it is. We make an intentional distinction between a game studio and a play studio, so much that we even have to write game and then stroke it out, because we try to only make digital toys for kids, which means no winning, no losing, no high scores, no stress, no levels, just free play in any sort of way that you find the most stimulating and fun. We're owned by a media company called Bonnier, and have been since conception. It was started as a little project and now has grown into this whole big company. We launched in March 2011, although we started doing research in 2010, the autumn, and started making apps in January of 2011. And I think we're about 21 people plus some freelancers with one office, the big office, the studio, in the creative studio, which is in Stockholm, Sweden, and a smaller marketing and business office in San Francisco, where I now reside since a year back. When I was here last year, I just moved. So now I still haven't not quite got the accent right, but I'm getting a little bit more American than I was before. These are some of the apps that we've made. Hopefully you recognize a few of them. So 17 in total. Familiar themes, I suppose. Sort of things like, going to the doctor, having a tea party, and stuff like that. Oh, hang on, here we go. Cooking in the kitchen, playing dress up. Sort of familiar themes that you can try to pick up. So we have over 35 million downloads. As some sort of point, this is where we were last year when I was here. So this is around the time of dustormagic 2010. So there's been some traction since then. Also, this is when we released our last product, which is far too long ago. But even after that point, we've been growing at quite a nice rate. And I thought, I know a lot of you are struggling, and believe me, I'm still struggling with this too, on how to actually get these figures rolling and how to make this a sustainable business. I want to be clear to say that it's possible. Toca Boca is a profitable company in its own right. I'm owned by a big media company, but we've made all that money back. We've paid them back, so to speak, and it's a profitable company in its own right, even though there's quite a lot of us in different parts of the world. So it's definitely possible to do so in these ecosystems. It's not easy, and it requires a fair balance of skill and luck, and I thought these 5 decisions hopefully might help a little bit in steering 1 or 2 bad decisions that you can avoid. So the first good decision that I think I made, and we did this at a very, very early stage, was I had a very high degree of trust in the team that we hired. This was a necessity, I would say, and it was a necessity for several reasons. Partially, it's the way that I think these teams work best within a high level of trust. Last year I was here and I spoke about our sort of the process and enabling complete creative freedom within certain constraints. And that is still something that we work with quite high, give a very, very high level of creative freedom, but have very distinct constraints in which you need to work under to make sure that it's a product that can actually work. These two are the founders. These are old Instagrams from our first account, which is under another name and all sorts of stuff. So just some very early pictures which have been shared with the 24 followers or something that account actually has. So I thought, this is me, and this is my co-founder, Asilomar. We worked together at Bonnier Research and Development. I was doing global research and analysis, trying to work out how media companies can work better in a modern world of technology. Emil is a user experience designer, and we'd worked together before. I think we both had sort of coming from different angles, but had something in that we could see systems and sort of understand how they work and sort of how you need to create something to fit into an ecosystem, whether that is the App Store or anything else. I think that's something that we have in common. And I decided very early on, I was looking into this sort of space broadly to bring Emil on, and I decided to make a very big bet on him, personally. He has 2 kids, spends a lot of time playing with them, had a lot of interesting ideas in this, but I'd worked with some children's journalism before, many years ago, and he'd never really formally worked with any kid stuff. So we were both complete novices. But I decided there and then that I think he's onto something, and we're going to sort of see where this goes. So in the research phase that we did together, we sort of came up with this basically 2 guidelines for a successful app. I think the first one is the most important one. It's quality. So if the quality is not there, you're going to have a very, very hard time in the App Store. I think both Apple premieres quality, and I think quality premieres itself in a way. And so the quality of the product needs to be there. The second one is that it needs to be visible. So if nobody's finding it, going back to the panel references, there's a lot of quality in the App Store which is just simply not being found. And those 2 need to be taken care of to an equal degree, more or less. We decided early on that I would do the visibility and Emil would do the quality, and we sort of divided it in that way. So I'm technically speaking his boss, although it feels like the opposite most of the times. This is our first office. This is 2010. You can sort of, I don't know how well that comes through. It's Sweden in the autumn time, so it's pretty bad, as you can imagine. We sat there and tried to work out what we were going to do, basically. We sort of had to trust each other, and the only thing we really had was these outer parameters of this is what we think a successful company in this space needs to have. But it was very broad and it was quite abstract, but these were some sort of constraints. So we were sitting there and we sort of, well, where do we go from here? None of us, we can't make any apps, we can't code anything. It was dubious whether we could come up with any concepts which was worthwhile either. So we decided we should interview a bunch of people and sort of try to find out what we need. So this is the 2 first play designers that we hired. We happened to have some beer in the fridge for some reason that we'd had from some event. So we met a whole bunch of people in a row, but this is the day which Jens Peter, which some of you may have met on the East Coast, and Chris Lindgren, the 2 first employees of Toca Boca, signed on this day. And because since we had these beers in the fridge, we decided to do a celebratory toast on a Sunday, which was the day we had there. This was one bet in itself. Sort of, do we need gamers, people that are good at gaming, or do we need people that understand children? And after meeting both of them, it was sort of fairly clear that we went for the latter. Chris and JP had never done any apps specifically either, though. So that was still a bit of an unclear thing, but they had a thorough understanding of how to make interactive products for children. And we, in then turn, I made a big bet on Emil. Emil convinced me to make a big bet on Chris and JP, which was also a very good move. So this then followed this. This is sitting in our next office, coming up with concepts, all these tiny little pieces of paper with ideas and random stuff that we were sort of playing around with to try to work out exactly what it was we were going to do. And for me, I have so much other things that I need to do that in order to follow this sort of initial division that we did, I decided for the first time, working with a lot of products and stuff, to sort of step out and say, right, I just have to trust these guys to work this out. I can help, I can be sort of a partner, and I can give feedback to the degree that as good as I can, but it's more or less in the hands of this team. One guy I worked with a little bit, and two people that I'd hardly ever met. But I decided that this is the way it's going to be because it's so small and we're so dependent on each other, and there really are no perfect answers anyway. So if that is the case, then let's make sure that everybody feels empowered enough to put everything in. So we sat there, and they sat there and they came up with all these ideas. Some of them were very strange, and some of them I still have on my wall next to me as a reminder. I think I mentioned this last year maybe, but my two favorite ones is one is Toca dancing radio, which is just a very strange idea of just some sort of robot with a radio on his head dancing, and that's basically it. The other one is dogastrophe, which is just a pile of dogs playing on the word catastrophe, but with dogs instead. Also, no concept there whatsoever. So there's a lot of these things coming along, and I can tell you it required some considerable faith in letting a few of these ideas through, because it sounded crazy. But it made perfect sense once you actually got hold of it. This is the first product team, the team that made the first Toca Boca products. And I'm going to get back to this, but what I decided to sort of, the way I could add most value to these sort of talented individuals was to try to remove as many obstacles out of their way. Like, how can I make sure that everything else is in place so that these people that I've made this big bet on that I think know what they're doing, and it turned out that they did, but I didn't know that at the time, how can they get the most perfect work environment given the circumstances that we had? And that required a very high level of trust, which I think was a crucial part then and a crucial part now, and something that continues to sort of run through the company today. Move everything down, try not to control so much, bet on some individual people with a lot of talent, and I think that was a super important lesson for us. The bad decision, or a bad decision, was I thought, and maybe still do to a certain extent sometimes, I think that other people can solve my marketing problems. I'm assuming that anybody that's some sort of app developer has experienced app marketing trouble of some sort. It would be very, if you haven't, then please look me up afterwards because I want to hear more. I made a series of mistakes. I was responsible for the visibility, but it was only me doing all of the marketing for the first, I think it was 18 months of the company. It was just me. And I was also doing everything else, the whole CEO thing, whatever that is in a small company. It's basically anything from the finances to doing the coffee and, everything. This is our first sort of curve during the first few months of releasing something. So this is where we released our two first products, which was Helicopter Taxi and Tea Party. And that day, or sort of that day in the middle there, $63.87, 37 downloads in total. That was slightly less than I had anticipated. I thought we'd done a lot. I've hired this full team. I've gone to my media company to sort of say, this is going to be a great thing. You just got to trust me on this one. This is really going to work out. And this is what happens. So that was a little stressful. So I thought, well, maybe all we got to do is we just got to throw some more apps in there and we'll get this whole thing going. So we did that. We released Toca Doctor, Paint My Wings, and Hair Salon. And that day, $420, 60 cents, 458 downloads, which is still significant improvement from where I was. And the curve at the time looked amazing, but still, this is not quite what I was expecting. So we released yet another product, Robot Lab, nothing really happening to any degree. And somewhere here, I'm getting very stressed. Very stressed indeed, because I'm trying to withhold this stress. Again, going back to sort of my team, I know that they know what they're doing, but this is my job, so I can't put this on anyone else. So the only thing I can do is make sure there's a great office and people sitting there coming up with great ideas. And the products, those of you that have tried it, they were good. They were great. So there was nothing wrong with that. And I couldn't really point my finger to them and say it's because of the product, because I knew that it wasn't. So it was like, okay, maybe it's me. Maybe it's my part of this, which is the mistake. So I'm thinking to myself quietly that surely someone knows how this works. There has to be this. This is me coming from a research background. Like, there has to be someone out there that can actually do this. And if I just find these people, they will help me enough. And I'm new to the app space. This has got to work itself out, more or less. So you start talking to the agencies. So the agencies start well. We used a few different sort of PR agencies and people that say that they do app marketing and things like that. And I think if trusting a lot was important in the first lesson, then this was the point where I trusted too much. I thought that they knew something that I had not found in my own research, which turned out to be wrong. So they start by saying things, and these are actual quotes. Your best research for success in the world of apps. That sounds like a good start. Like, yes, that is exactly what I need. Okay. And then, sort of as we go along, and I'm noticing that they have arbitrary comments about the products, like, maybe you can do that. Like, well, yeah, maybe, but that's got nothing to do with anything. Just some tiny comments. And sending press releases, and just nothing's really working. And I'm getting in touch with these people like, this isn't really working. And then these are some other real quotes. My apologies, I seem to have missed that last email. Like, okay, here we go. I've heard this before. And then, apologies for the delay. As you saw, I was from my out of office, I was in the woods for the last few days. Again, also actual quotes from this app marketing place. And after sort of going through all this trouble and sort of hoping in a way that this was going to work itself out, I finally as I dug more into this, I completely agree with you that our level of service on this account has not been up to par. In fact, I'm quite embarrassed by this. And so you should be, because it was awful. So I thought, okay, that didn't work. But I was living in this, dream maybe, that if I just find the right people, they will help me, because they sound great. They sound like they know what they're doing. And maybe that will solve everything. So that didn't really work. So then I'm thinking, okay, what else could the problem be? Then why isn't this sort of flying off the shelves to the extent that maybe it should? And I'm thinking, maybe we need another brand. So we were part of the Bonnier Group. And the Bonnier Group owns Parenting Magazine, which was just been cancelled, by the way, and sold and closed down, which says something in its own right. So we decided maybe we should partner up with Parenting Magazine, because they have millions of people as subscribers. This should work. It's a trusted brand. Nobody knows Toca Boca at the time. Parenting, everybody knows that. Sounds great. So we did this, and we sort of said, okay, well, you'll market it through your magazine. Somehow we'll make the app, and this will sort of somehow work because I'm using this fantastic brand. And then I thought, well, maybe that's not enough. I should do even more than this. Maybe what we need is a local brand. So I went to the largest publisher of German kids magazines. So we did these two things, and it didn't work at all. It was completely flat. These are the biggest brands in their respective markets, and Germany is a massive market, like 90 million, something like that, and just no pickup whatsoever, which was, I can't even tell you how disappointing this was. We have now, since then, closed these two things down and said that we're going to do this on our own, and after I changed the name from Parenting's Birthday Party Playtime to Toca Birthday Party, it's now selling better, which is worrying. But I didn't have enough faith in our own brand at the time. I was so sure that I was lacking something very significant. And that if I just tack that brand on to what we already have, which I thought was quite a good product, then this was going to magically work itself out. And that does not work, at least not for us. And that was a big lesson. It took a lot of time, which was a complete waste. That's something, a big learning that we took away. What made a difference was my boss at the time that says, and said, if you're going to fail, then at least fail big. Otherwise, it seems like you haven't tried. You can imagine these curves for a company which is, several $1 billion revenue total. My curve of saying, well, I went from $60 to $450 a day is not very compelling. And it's sort of a stressful meeting to have with your boss. And he says this, which was a great move. Because what happened was that, okay, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money and do something strange, which is, well, I'm going to have to sacrifice my $450 away and give away hair salon, our biggest seller at the time, give that away for free for a while. And after that's when our first sort of spike started taking off. So that was a very good piece of advice, but I was concerned over a very long time, and I can tell you still, I'm a very worried person. So I'm continuously concerned, just on different sort of thresholds now and then. The third decision, which sounds like a bad one or sounds like troublesome, you could say that it's bad to cancel projects, but I would actually argue that this was a very good decision that we made. Those of you that know of us know that we do a lot of extensive playtesting. We do it before. This is actually Emil's kits playtesting with Chris in our second office early on. We do it during the development process to a very high degree, and we also test some afterwards, just to see if everything worked as we should, or how we should update things, and so on. So you have to be very true to this. This has been the method that we decided on very early on, and we decided to try to stay as true, stay as faithful as you can to this process. So we don't always, or don't only, I should say, do play testing. We also test some play, which is playing ourselves. This is for the team playing different fishing games in our conference room at an early on. And what this little image is trying to illustrate, that a certain type of play, which is very hard to prototype. It's just like, it's the interaction of something which is really good fun. In this case, it's sort of dipping your rod into this, and the fish comes up and it sort of eats it with a magnet. That's sort of hard to get right in a prototype. You've got to get to a quite high sort of degree of sophistication for that to even happen. And if that's the fun moment, then it's sort of difficult. A lot of the other stuff we did on paper. So you could sort of test it early on paper, and sort of you could remove and add on things. But certain things just don't work that way. So that leads you to two different sort of things that you have to do. The number one is you can either be super sure that even if we're going to spend all this time to get this right, it's going to be worth it because it's going to be amazing once we're there, or you just have to make a big bet. And in this case, it was probably a combination of the two, but it's more leaning towards this being a bet. So we started making a new product, and this is the intro, which I think nobody has ever actually seen. So we started making a product called Anteater Classics, or musical Anteater. This is what it looks like. It's an oil painting of this this anteater with sort of a sign thing in the middle, and the classics. Already then thinking of a series before we even got the interaction right. Great move. Thinking of different sort of music styles, and we thought the idea was, if you have you're the anteater, your finger is slurping up these ants as they move down the screen, and as you slurp the ants, a tone plays for each ant. So if you slurp all of them in a certain direction, or sort of in the right order, then it plays a little song for you. And that sort of seemed interesting as that idea. The faster you were, we managed to pitch the song a little bit, so the song played quicker and quicker, so you could play it at the very top, or you could be slow and play it at the bottom, and it sort of played along this little song. The idea and the bet was that partially it would be a fun way to play music, because if you turned the phone, you would see that it's just the notes. You don't really think of it that way, but that's because you're looking at it from the other side. But it really was that way. And the fun part was going to be the slurping of this, and sort of the slurping of the ants and getting this song connection. And it sounds fun, right? It sounds sort of fun anyway. So we made this product, and we spent quite a lot of time getting this right. And what happened was, when we tested it, parents really liked it. This is great. You can sort of, you get the song immediately, and you sort of start trying to get a better flow to try to get people, to make the song sound just as you intended it. However, the kids didn't at all. There's a few reasons that I think that, that there are probably numerous. But one of the reasons is that they didn't really see the connection between the slurping of the ants and the song playing. It was just that sometimes the song sounded really bad, and that seemed to be a random occurrence, and sometimes it sounded really good. It had nothing really to do with the slurping of the ants. It's just like, why is this song interfering with my slurping? So that was a problem. There's probably a few other things too. It felt like when we got there, we'd have to redo quite a lot of things in order to get all the way. So even if we'd spent quite a lot of time doing this, we had to cancel it. So Anteater Classics never made it. Intro animation, oil painting, and all actually never came out, and is not intended to be released either. And I think sort of the lesson of this, which is the good decision in a way, is that if you're not going to be true to your testing, then there's no point doing it. So if the testing cannot have two different results, like it's a go or it's a no-go, then you shouldn't really be doing it. And that's a super easy thing to say, but in this case, we actually put our money where our mouth is and said no to a lot of hours spent on a project which was just, this is not good enough. This is really not up to the standards that we expect from ourselves. It was done with the best intentions. It was done with the same team that's done other things, so there's no criticism towards the team at all. It just didn't work. And we just had to be sure, and it was not easy, I can tell you that, but it was definitely clear for us that this is a deal-breaker moment, and we made the difficult choice in that case to say, this is not going to work out. And it was not easy and it's not fun, but I think it was the right decision and a good decision. And we've done not maybe that, we haven't gone that far before, but we've done it on a few other occasions where we've killed things at a very early stage because it just does not seem like it's going in the right direction. Maybe better to just say, okay, we spent all this time, put it to one side, start over. So, the fourth decision, a bad one. Letting technology get in the way of the fun. We were very enthusiastic in the beginning about sort of the technical prerequisites, if you will, of how these new devices coming into people's homes. The iPad had just come out. We looked at this and we just thought all these technical just possibilities basically which was in there. There's touchscreens, there's microphones, there's accelerometers, there's GPS, there's compact, all sorts of stuff. Amazing. Suddenly we have this almost like a canvas to work with, which we've never had before. So in sort of early play or sort of concept development time, we had that as a parameter. Like, so how can we use these different sort of technologies that suddenly we now have access to, and mix that with a certain type of playing and maybe see what we can come up with in that way. That was one of the methods that we used. Not everything, but we spent some time doing this. So in this case, we said, well, okay, well, if we have the camera and the gyroscope and active play, what can we do with that? So what happened in this case was Helicopter Taxi, our first product. So this is a fun thing. It's scemed. Where we use the gyroscope to make it feel like you're sort of flowing with a helicopter. You're rushing through certain things, you use the gyroscope in the device, and it's sort of an augmented reality effect. And it's very different and very interesting conceptually. What you do is you pick it up, and it's a taxi, as the name alludes to, and you have different characters that calls you, and then you have to fly to a certain place. It doesn't really matter where it is, you make that up yourself, you put the device down, picks a character up, you pick it back up again, and then the character's in there, and then you decide to fly to somewhere else. And this was an interesting thing. I remember the final day before submit, Emil and me rushing around in the office, swinging our hands like a pendulum back and forth to see when exactly does it land, how flat does it need to be before it actually lands, and just trying to get that thing right, just tweaking the tiny, tiny details of when the helicopter could land and when it couldn't. Maybe we should have spent that time thinking about something else. For instance, the touchscreen, which we sort of ignored in this app completely. We were so in, like, we've got to use this gyroscope and the camera in a cool way. And that we sort of forgot that, of course, the first thing that kids do when they look at this is they poke at it and say, what's going to happen now when I can play with a helicopter? And nothing happens. We had some ideas, but we were late and we didn't quite have time to get that in, and it wasn't like we completely ignored the fact, but nothing really of those significant features ever made it into the final product. So what we released was something which was interesting as a camera thing, but for a lot of kids wasn't fun enough. And a lot of that had to do with the touchscreen. It's fun if you get it, if you see what I mean, but it's not as obvious as a lot of other things. And I think this led to, let's call it slight disappointment. These are 2 reviews that I got the other day. This is from 2011, but still. Number 1, not worth the money, and then in all caps, you don't do anything in this game, and then 5 exclamation points. So Bubbles says, all you do in this game is fly an animated helicopter around the room, which is exactly what you are supposed to do, but that apparently was not enough. I wouldn't have got it even if it was free. It requires a camera too, by the way. Don't get it, worst app I've ever had, 1 star. Thanks, Bubbles. But she sort of, or he or she, I don't know, but they sort of sum it up quite well. It's all you do is fly an animated helicopter around the room, and she's right. That is all you do. And that is not enough. And I think that we were focusing so much on using these cool sort of technical parameters that we sort of forgot about a few other things that maybe the running around with a gyroscope, if we'd had a few less of those hours and a few more hours of other things, then maybe that would have been better. That said, that was our first product, but still it was something that we definitely learnt from. So, the 5th and the last decision, the good one, saying no to 99% of all requests. This is very hard, but I think it's been maybe at least my own best decision of being CEO of this company. I get an onslaught of stuff. I don't know how many emails every day, a lot of stuff, people wanting to do different things. And I try very hard to be super clear on what I can and what I cannot do. In general, in the beginning, again, I was searching, and I was looking for stuff, and I wanted people to contact me and say, we're going to solve your marketing problems. And a lot of other companies sort of presenting partnerships, and I think it's not a partnership if I'm paying for it. It's a very elegant way of just selling me something. Like, maybe we can partner around something. Or you mean I partner with you by giving you my money and you give me a service. That's a great partnership. So partially just getting rid of those to begin with, but even people with good ideas and things is not necessarily something which is a great fit for what you want to do. And it certainly was not a great fit for what we wanted to do. And I think my job very much is maintaining focus. So this is like, if I'm trying to illustrate what this process is like, if this is all the incoming requests, then we have a very clear strategy of exactly what we think we should be doing. So all that to the left there is not even a strategic fit. It's just, it does not fit in what we do. It sounds fun, sometimes sounds amazing, or like playful, like interesting, conceptually fantastic, but it's not a strategic fit. It does not fit what we set out to do, so it has to go. Secondly, we're very picky and particular about our brand. We've got to make sure that something fits and feels nice and has all the right values to make sure that it fits in with the Toca Boca brand. I'm very careful to do things that could in any way hurt the brand, because I think that's an important part of what we've created so far. And that trust takes a very long time to build up, and it's very quickly to lose. You can lose trust in a second if you make the wrong decisions. So you've got to make sure that it's a great brand fit. And then finally, you've got to get the timing right. A lot of people get in touch, and it's just not the right time. It's just, this sounds interesting, but I can't do it right now. We have so much other things that we need to finish. And that, the final part, is the projects that we say yes to. This is the process. I handle I handle everything up to the strategic fit, and sometimes further than that, just making sure that my team does not even hear about this. They should not be thinking about these things because it's not a fit for our company. And I could be making the wrong decisions, but it's my decision to make. I'm the CEO, I'm responsible for making sure that the company has the right strategy and doing the right thing, and I need to safeguard my team to stop being distracted with things that we're in the end not going to do anyway. So they have to think about one thing and one thing only, which is making magic products. That's the only thing they should be thinking about. And until something managed to go through this little pyramid, that's when we can start having a discussion. And even like I told you, even on the few occasions something does go through, it still turns out to be a bad idea a lot of the time. So even that's not a guarantee, unfortunately. I think it's important, it's probably important in any business, but I think it's important for us because I imagine that those of you that get a lot of success or recognition, at least in the App Store, get sort of the same questions asked. Just to sort of tell you, we've said no to a lot of stuff. We've said no 500 times to make apps for others. TV shows, making physical toys, licensing our apps to famous brands, selling our company. But I'm very close on a few occasions, and I've been very close to making yet another bad decision. In a very early stage, I almost sold Helicopter Taxi to some travel company to do sort of like a charter, going to Mallorca type of company, which I was going to rebrand the helicopter to one of their airplanes. It was a terrible idea. It would have been a terrible idea, terrible product. But I sort of had the contract in my hand and like, I don't know, I sort of got to get some sort of money into this company relatively soon or else this is game over. So I've been very close, and again, I don't want to reverse engineer it to just make it sound like I made all the right choices, but I had said no to a lot of stuff. I probably said no to a few of you in this room. And it's difficult. It's super difficult, but I think it is a very, very valuable lesson. I think it's arguably the best decision that I made when being part of creating this company, is just making sure that your team can focus on the right thing. And this, I think, goes for even if you don't have a team. If you're a team of one, it's the same thing. Just to make sure that you don't get distracted. This is so difficult. It takes so much time, so much passion, so much commitment. And even if you have that, that's no guarantee. So getting sidetracked with a bunch of other things is not what you need at that time. I see myself, and I think a lot of others, again, if you're a CEO, if you're CEO of one, remove obstacles for your team, make sure your team is focused on the right thing. That's the only thing, that's the most important thing that I do. And that's, even if you're a team of one, I would argue that's probably the same thing. You know, there are not enough hours in the day to do all of these things, and it's something which is easily forgotten, and it's exceptionally difficult to do. So I found this quote, which I thought was nice, at least a nice way of doing it, instead of saying that, say no to the request, not to the person. You're not rejecting the person, just declining his invitation, so make that clear. I thought that's a nice little reminder to myself that I keep reading to myself, just I don't want to be a bad person, I try to answer everybody, I try to say I can try, or I can think about it, I can look at it, but I cannot guarantee that we're going to do it, and just trying to do that in a nice way, and know that I'm doing it for the sake of the team, and for the sake of the team being able to continue to make really great products. So, to sum up, I think sort of more or less the five lessons in a brief point. So, the first one is do what you do best. I think someone said that you should try to do what only you can do, and then find people for the rest. That's where you have to start. The things that only you can do, just make sure that you're doing them, and then gradually you can fill up with all the other things. And in small companies, you tend to fill up into the weekend and into the late nights and everything, but nevertheless, it's sort of start by doing that specific thing, and then find these people around that you can trust to take care of the rest. I made very, very big bets, bigger than I've ever made when hiring people before, and they paid out in a massive way, and it became so much better than if I would have done it myself. In app marketing, it's like anything else in life. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. App marketing is proven to be identical to the rest of life. I don't know if there's a metaphor here, but there probably is somewhere. But this is, a lot of people in your inboxes are telling you things, and my experience, at least if that's worth anything, is that they don't know what they're doing either. None of us do. We're all trying. At least you don't get a bill every month from yourself. The third one is, don't be afraid to cancel products if they're not working. Sort of stay true to this. It's difficult, and I can see that it's being even more difficult when you're a smaller team, tighter financial constraints. I think it pays off. It definitely pays off on a brand level, but I think it pays off on every single level. I don't think you even want to, if you know that your gut feeling is saying this is not right, then you still put it out there, it's never going to feel quite right. I think sort of the peace of mind in knowing that you did the best you could is important, even if that leads to you potentially having spent a lot of hours and maybe some money on things that never actually gotten anywhere. Fourth one is make sure that your product is fun, above all. I think so many apps that I see have the best intentions and the worst execution. It's like, I'm going to try to make kids to do X, Y, Z, which is an admirable idea and something which is great, but if the kids don't like the app and it's not fun, then they're not going to use it. So it doesn't matter how admirable the idea behind it is, if it's just not fun enough, then it simply will not work. That's been our experience. So sort of, we try to start with the fun and end with the fun. If it's not there, then the concept is wrong, you need to start over and find something else. Finally, just say no, in a nice way, but still. Say no, and make sure to stay super focused on what's important. Okay, thanks. Any questions?
Obviously, you established a very high quality for the brand. So in that light today, would you make a new version of it, like Counter Taxi? Would you remove it from the line because some people that love the Toca Boca apps may be disappointed with that weaker app? What would you do if you have one app in the line that's just not as good?
It's a tricky one. It's a very good question, and one that we discuss. Partially discuss that, and also sort of that the experience that you have. I'm sure the developers here that have a lot of apps have the same thing, is the experience is very different depending on where you start. I'm sure Dr. Moose has this problem too. If you start with wheels on the bus, or you start with more trucks, it's completely different. And the expectation that you have for the brand is different due to that too. The problem is that, Helicopter Taxi was not as good as it could be. It's not that bad. It's not as bad as Bubbles is implying, I would argue. But, there's still a lot of people that really love that app. So I'm hesitant to remove it for that reason, but maybe when there's a time where we can, there's more time over, whenever that's going to be, we can go back and we can maybe polish it up a little bit. But that it's a continuously difficult thing to do, is to see how much time do we say we've got to go back and fix something, tweak it, fix it, remake it, and how much is it just cut your losses? There are going to be people like Bubbles that simply do not get or like this app, and that's fair enough. It's very hard. We have that discussion all the time, but for the time being, everything is staying.
I was just wondering what the thinking was in creating this kind of great universe of characters in your apps. These characters don't really see that names, they evolve from app to app, and that seems very unique to me about your product, and I just was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. They often have names, but the names don't appear in the apps. So you have to sort of be super interested in order to find them. It's normally sort of a caption on a Flickr image somewhere, which says it. But technically they have names. But I see what you mean, and it's a good observation. It's intentional, of course. Successful children's media previously has very much been based on narrative. And sort of this is what everybody keeps telling us all the time, is saying, or you should develop your character set. You should have the same characters coming back in all of the apps all of the time, because that is what people generally do when they build the character brands. And in narrative form, in the media that's been so broadly distributed, which is magazines, television, books, they've never been interactive. It's always based on sort of a linear progression through a narrative, because there was no option. You cannot have interactive TV, it's impossible. It has to be a linear experience. You sit back, you're passively consuming something. And again, it doesn't have to be bad, but I do think that due to the medium has formed what goes into it to a very high degree. And this is the first time we have an interactive platform, which means that the old rules don't necessarily apply. So we've gone for this branded approach, which has values, if you see what I mean, sort of a quirkiness to it, something fun, something unexpected, with specific sort of values that always goes into every app, even if they're quite different. That creates a feeling of that this is a Toca Boca app. A lot of kids can see it straight away. There's nothing sort of that goes across, because I think that the interaction of things and the sort of, I think it's based around the interaction more than anything else. They're not mutually exclusive. We could do both. But we decided in every theme to make the absolute best product and the best choices for each individual product individually. Which means that if it's better or more fun with a lion in the hair salon than one of the characters that we made for Helicopter Taxi, then that's what it's going to be. If there's occasions where the two match perfectly, then maybe we would bring something back, but it's still to this day, it's discussions around like what is the absolute best, most fun experience in this single app, and then we make that choice more than anything else. But yeah, it's a different bet, and it's an interesting observation.
In my experience with Leapfrog and other organizations working with young children, there's often a temptation when you grow the business to think about aging up. And I just wondered how you thought about the focus you have, which I think is 3 to 6, and are you ever tempted to age up? How do you think about those issues?
Yeah, it's obviously a common temptation because yes, we have had that. I think it sort of happened whether we wanted to or not. We saw the adoption of our products in a higher age range than it was intentionally maybe designed for. I think it's due to the nature of the products to a high extent, which is you add your own imagination to it, which means that whatever imagination you have is going to create another sort of another experience. But yes, we will be going a little higher. Actually, the next titles that come out will be a little higher, but not that much. And we try to always make sure that you can play with it in different ways. So maybe there's more depth to it. Maybe there's more that you can sort of dive in, and you can keep going for longer. If you're older, there's more layers to it, but that the first layer is not too deep, so that you sort of get out of bounds from the beginning. But yeah, we're not going very far, but we're going a little further than maybe we've done.
Hi, you talked about trusting your team and the type of team you wanted to build, but I was just wondering if you had any lessons learned about how do you find the right fit of each individual people that you hire?
Well, I can tell you the reason why the team looks the way it does is partially due to the Stockholm hiring market, but also that there was no one before us really, not where we lived anyway, so there was no one I could hire from. It created this very low-key, nice environment where no one was an expert, because no one had done exactly this before. So that you couldn't really point to someone and say, well, what did you used to do? And because whatever that was is not necessarily relevant in the world of a touchscreen. It's not necessarily relevant in the world of mobile or any of these things, which means we hand-picked individuals that came from very many different backgrounds, which felt like they cared about the space and that they could work in a sort of a Scandinavian, non-hierarchical way together in very small teams. The teams are only 3 or 4 people often per product, and they work together all day, every day. So it's much more sort of a vibe, I want to say, because you can you sort of hire for that, and then you can sort of whatever skills that you need, you can often train people if they have the right interest and sort of right motivation in general. It's looking for the perfect people to hire will take you a very, very long time. And I don't share the Silicon Valley idea that everybody has to be the best of every single thing. I think those people often come with a lot of other difficulties in managing and working together with others, and they're not necessarily very interested in changing their minds, which is something that we need to do every day. So we look for people that have a good vibe, if you will. I think that's the best way of phrasing it.
Well, folks, you just got a pretty good dose of practical information. I hope that you take it. Bjorn, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.